Afternoon. I'm Casey Bozeman. I work for the University of Georgia's Extension and Georgia 4-H program, and excited to provide an opportunity for us to spend some time together learning about a resource that I recently found out about called Flippity, and how you can use this in your virtual 4-H program. So our goal together for today is for it to be extremely interactive, intentional learning that will happen on both me as the facilitator and you as the participants, and certainly wanting the knowledge we talk about today to be applicable to our work within 4-H youth development. Part of our presentation is going to be very interactive in nature and letting you all actually see what Flippity is about. I'm giving you the opportunity to demo a little bit and practice on your own. So you'll likely want to open up another tab on your internet browser if you have the capabilities of doing that. I will also spend some time showing you how to actually build these resources and then how they could potentially work regardless of what you do in the context of 4-H, knowing that it could be something very valuable for you. At any point, if you have questions or concerns, or feel free to put those in the chat box, or if you have the capability to unmute and ask that question, do know I want this to be beneficial for you, and hopefully it can help you, again, regardless of your role within 4-H. So with that, just kind of thinking about how do you feel about creating fun, educational, and meaningful virtual activities. Certainly because of our global pandemic that we're experiencing, I know a lot of programming that was traditionally face-to-face has pivoted or shifted to that virtual experience, and know that probably we initially just kind of rolled with the punches, right? That's what we do in 4-H youth development, but chances are none of us were probably experts by any means in that virtual experience. And I think that's true because Extension values that face-to-face contact. We value those relationships we build with audiences. And so at least for me, kind of starting out in this global pandemic, I think I was a mixture between that face you see there in the middle that's a little hesitant, maybe even some of that sadness that relates to not being able to be with young people, because in that face-to-face context, I think we do such a great job of giving them educational experiences. They're meaningful, they're quality, they're fun, but being able to translate that into a virtual setting is just tough, right? And there's only so many scavenger hunts you can do around your house on Zoom before everybody kind of gets bored. And certainly we know in 4-H too, we're always teaching young people content. And so, you know, that content may be related to agriculture or science or healthy living. And how do you kind of translate that content to still make it a meaningful experience? So unofficially, as one of our Seek 4-H faculty members, I kind of just started poking around and figuring out what do we need to do. I have worked also as a county extension 4-H agent, and I know that we crave giving young people good experiences. And so during this time, I have found a lot of different resources out there to make virtual programming perhaps less painful or maybe even enjoyable, depending on how you want to view that. And today, going to share about that Flippity experience. So one of my favorite quotes to remember is there on the screen by Sidney Hook. And just quickly sharing it with you, everyone who remembers his own education remembers the teachers, not the methods and techniques. The teacher is the heart of the education system. And I think that's so valuable. And certainly we can substitute teacher for 4-H leader, professional, volunteer, you know, whatever that title may be. And that's what young people are going to remember. So when we are engaging with them, especially in a virtual context or setting, still making sure that we have that connection with that young person. They're learning something. Who cares about the methods and the techniques and the scholarship behind what we do? We know we do great work, but today really focusing in on actually educating and implementing that knowledge so that it can benefit the young people. Now, as a side conversation, if we do want to talk some of the more scholarly methods behind what we're doing, feel free to let me know and we can have that sidebar conversation. But really today we're focusing on that implementation piece. Uh, so when I think back to trying to translate information in a virtual context, especially as it relates to this program Flippity, I think of Bloom's taxonomy. And those of us who have perhaps had some formal education classes and experiences may be familiar with Bloom. Certainly some that may have come to the 4-H path in a less traditional route may be unfamiliar. But essentially Bloom was a psychologist and educator that came up with 6 different levels of how information is being constructed and what we do with this knowledge. And so starting at the bottom and kind of working our way up. Sometimes Bloom is actually made into a pyramid style shape to show that there's a larger foundation and you build up from that base to that apex or that tip there. But thinking of, in the basic of sense when we're educating young people, first we want them to be able to remember the information that we're giving them. As it moves further up, being able to understand, apply that information, analyze, and then finally evaluate and or create something new from that information that they have. So what's interesting is when we think of a learning experiences, chances are, if it's a one-time educational type session, we're certainly hitting on those lower levels of Bloom. Maybe at the end, a young person can remember by listing the definition of a particular word. Maybe they can understand something, so explain how something may take place, like the water cycle. But beyond that, from one singular educational experience, we don't want it to be overly complicated, right? Chances are they may not make it all the way to the top, and that's completely okay. Over time, perhaps you can build a series of lessons or activities that eventually lead to some sort of culminating project or experience. And sometimes we certainly have 4-H programs and projects that are geared that way, but maybe just depending on, again, the context, we may be kind of hitting some of that lower level experience there. Certainly when I think of a virtual experience, I'm really focusing in on that lower extremity with remembering and understanding information. And today, you'll see that the tools that Flippity are going to give us are going to help young people take content that they've been introduced to and help maybe recall it, list it, type it out, memorize it, match it up, things like that. Maybe they have to better understand things, and so fill in a diagram or a chart or a graph or something like that. But at the end, hopefully it's a good experience for us to basically check and see if they can recall that information that they've been given. So at this point, that was just a quick introduction to kind of my background and experience with online learning, and certainly how we can use Flippity. I'm going to take a quick pause and check the chat box to see if there's any questions or concerns. All right, so seeing none, again, at any point, feel free to stop and let me know. I definitely want to make sure this content, of course, is helpful and relevant for you. So let's spend a few minutes talking about Flippity before we're going to dive into the best part, which is the creation. So Flippity is essentially an online platform. It's a website, and it's a tool that uses Google Sheets. So that's like the Google version of Microsoft Excel, which is the spreadsheet program, to create various games and interactive experiences. So somebody spent a lot of time, and what they did was basically wrote computer code. So they were able to take a spreadsheet, which is just, of course, columns and rows with different cells. And so the way you format those cells then gets converted into some sort of interactive game and experience. So it is a free resource. It's easy to use, and it can be a lot of fun, especially as it relates to our work within cooperative extension and 4-H. So I stumbled upon it, again, as I was just seeing some various resources out there for virtual learning, and have been thoroughly impressed with how the program works and knowing that it's 100% free. I will tell you, there's not a lot of bells and whistles, so it's not super fancy by any means. You know, there's some things you can certainly customize, colors and text and things like that. Some stuff you just can't, but at the end of the day, it definitely gives you the bare bones to do what you need to get done. And again, it's all completely free. Somebody has done all the hard work to me, which was rewriting that computer code to make it all work. So it's not any type of program where you need usernames and passwords and all of that kind of stuff. It's very basic and simple, and again, a really great resource, I think, to have. So just to let you know, if you were the creator, that's kind of the term I've given for maybe those of us in the adult world, whether we're paid for each faculty and staff, maybe we're volunteers, whatever that role may be, you're the one who's creating the activity in Flippity. You're going to need internet access, of course, and a Google account. So if you don't already have a Google account, getting one of those can be free. I personally stay logged into my Google account all of the time, which is great because then all of the things that I create are automatically saved in my Google Drive. And so I can go back and quickly reference things and or make easy, simple updates or edits as needed. As the user, so the participant that may be doing this activity in Flippity, that could easily be your 4-H members. It could be an advisory group, adult volunteers. They're going to need internet access as well, you know, whether that's, of course, on some sort of computer or smart device. And then they're going to need a link to the activity. So again, nobody needs any type of special usernames and passwords and accounts and all of that other than the creator that would need the Google account. There is a way to work around that, but honestly, Google accounts are free. It's easy to get one. And I actually recommend that if you may be working, you know, in a county 4-H office where multiple people would want access to the same Flippities to be able to edit and manipulate them, you may consider setting up libertycounty4h@gmail.com and share that collective username and password so that multiple people can be working on that same content for the same activity at once. And so just to let you know, at the end today, I am going to collect, if you're so kind to share your name and email address with me. Tomorrow, I will share back with you a handout that kind of outlines all of the resources that Flippity has. But here I have chosen to highlight 12. And once we get to the website, you'll see which these 12 are. But to me, are more promising in that 4-H youth development realm, right? So there's online flashcards. There's a quiz show that's very similar to Jeopardy. There's a scavenger hunt, which is kind of like a question and answer type experience. There's a board game that includes a rollable dice and movable pieces and question cards and things like that. So kind of think of a interactive Candyland. Manipulatives are word tiles that you're able to move around. There's a matching memory game. So you think of in the real world where you turn the cards over and you flip them up to try to get the match. You can do that in a virtual setting. Some things that may be more common, word searches and crossword puzzles. There's the word scrambles where they scramble up just the letters of a particular word and you have to figure out what that is. The snowman game is similar to like a hangman style game or Wheel of Fortune where you're guessing a certain word by choosing either consonants or vowels and the letters get filled in appropriately. There's also a fun randomizer and then a random name picker. That can also help when you want to give young people options in a virtual experience, and maybe they can spin the wheel to be able to choose what activity they have to complete or things like that. So let's go ahead and do what I love best is exploring Flippity. So if you'll give me just a few moments to get our screens transitioned. And while I'm working on that, if you have any questions or concerns, again, feel free to throw those in the chat box. I would love to hear them. All right, so I think everybody should be seeing the Flippity screen. If not, someone shout out or put in the chat box and let me know. But this is what Flippity looks like. So it's FLIPPITY.net. And once you open up the page, again, not a lot of bells and whistles here, but you can see all the different activities are listed as one little box. And so there's a variety as you kind of scroll down. And again, I will send back to you the list of things that I think are more applicable in the 4-H realm, but certainly just depending on what you're doing, knowing that all of these are available to you can be very, very helpful. So with that being said, essentially we're going to kind of walk through what's here on this page. I'm going to be able to show you all some examples, and then we'll talk about how you're able to build your own Flippity and customize it based on what your needs are. So with that being said, any of these Flippity activities, you can see the name is kind of listed there on the top. And then there's a demo, there's instructions, and a template. So for example, you can see the Flippity flashcards. If we clicked on demo, right here is what this would potentially look like, again, based on how you customize your exact Flippity. So here's the capital of Malaysia on one side. You flip the card around, it says Kuala Lumpur. Cool. You can advance to the next one, and then it shows you again the year of Columbus's discovery of the New World. Flip it over, it gives you 1492. Each of those little demos basically just kind of shows you what this exact activity would look like. So as we go back here, kind of if I'm unfamiliar with what that Flippity activity is, and I'll tell you, they continuously add new ones. So sometimes I'll log in and I'm like, oh, Mad Libs, that's new. So I kind of click on the demo first just to see what is going on. From there, the next thing I like to do is check out the instructions. So again, these instructions are super no frill kind of thing. It gives you the steps that you need to basically make your own set of flashcards. And then they have some cool FAQs as well. Each of these instruction sets is specific to what you're doing. So know the instructions to make flashcards are different than the instructions to make a manipulative. It also talks about if you want to delete things. Sometimes there's audio that can be infused into what you're doing. So for example, they have spelling words. That may be a great activity. I know in Georgia 4-H, we have a forestry judging team, and kids have to learn how to spell the names of trees correctly. So they can actually play an audio file, and then it would say loblolly pine, and they would have to type it out. So depending on your activity, you can have an audio included as well. Some activities like the flashcards, you can use pictures or actually YouTube videos. So maybe you do put a picture of some sort of insect and the young person has to identify it. So you can see all of those FAQs that are there. And then last but not least, for each activity, they have the template. And I'll show you in a few minutes what that template looks like, and we'll walk together to create a few of them. All right, I see a great question there in the chat box. If you have the link, could they do these activities on their own time, or does it need to be led by the creator? Can multiple people access and play the games at the same time? That's a great question. So as long as you have the link, and in a few moments, I'm actually going to put a link to some different activities in the chat box, so you will get to play around and see what they look like. So anybody, as long as they have the link, can access the Flippity activity. So, you know, you could create something and send it out, and then youth would be able to do it on their own time. It wouldn't be where you as the creator have to host a session together. Now I'll tell you, something like the Flippity quiz show makes sense for it to be hosted by somebody, perhaps sharing their screen on Zoom and going through the questions and answers and things like that. The other thing to know though, once I share the link with you all, it's not like everybody can see each other interacting with that Flippity. So if you've done something before like Google Jamboard or maybe Google Docs or OneDrive or something like that, where you can see people making edits together. That's not what it looks like at all. So for example, you could send out, and I'll show you with some of these here, you know, a matching test about vocabulary words associated with the parts of a horse. And you could send that to your horse judging team, and everybody could do it on their own in their own time. And it's not like if Casey does it, then nobody else on the team gets to do it, or Casey's answers are then shared or something like that. So that's a great question. Oh, cool, camp counselor training activities. I have not thought of that yet. And I hope at the end we'll get to spend a few minutes literally where people can just dump ideas in the chat box, because I think that's what's so valuable, is to hear everybody's own spin on how could you potentially use this. So I think a lot about it from when I worked as a county 4-H agent and now as a state specialist. A lot of times mine is certainly going to focus on science initiative. That's what I lead, and you know, around sharing science type content. But I think there could be a variety of ways to use this, which I think is really cool. So but yeah, that gives you just a quick overview of what each of these kind of activities look like. And like I mentioned too, they have added some more over time. I know the Mad Libs is relatively new, the self-assessment. And so just as you're clicking around, and you may use Flippity for a while and then come back, don't be surprised if there's some other things there. So what I kind of plan to do is the next few minutes give you all the opportunity. I'm going to put in the chat box some examples of different Flippities I've created, and show you very briefly here, and then probably take about a 5-minute pause and let you all explore them on your own. So the link I just shared is the general page that you see right now. This is a set of flashcards that pertain to the different meat cuts of a chicken for 4-H poultry judging. And so what happens here is, again, the back of the carcass beginning at the base of the neck and extending backward to the tail. Once you flip it over, it's the back. You can flip it back over if you'd like, and then advance to the next card. You can see that there's 17 cards total. They always stay in the same order unless you come up here and shuffle the cards around. There's not any audio added, but again, this is just a good way for young people to study different parts of the chicken when we talk about those meat cuts, and then flip over and test themselves. With the flashcards, you can change the color of the text. You can add images. So if you wanted to actually put a picture of a wing, that can be helpful instead of just the wording or the definition there. You can also add YouTube video links as well. So all of that's listed in the FAQ. So there's the flashcard part. It also gives you a list so the kids can see here, here's the definition of back, here's the definition of a boneless breast, et cetera, et cetera. There's a way they can actually practice, so they can pretend typing in the word. This is also turned into a matching game. You can see that obviously that's not a flat. Instead, where's the word back? There we go. So once you've built out that content, the flashcard setting can be used in a lot of different ways. The next one I'll show you, this is the random name picker. So it's kind of like a spinner wheel. And on here, I put some various agricultural commodities that we grow or produce in Georgia. So with this, a fun thing that we can do is have kids spin the spinner wheel. It's going to land on one of those commodities like sweet corn. And then from there, perhaps if you're doing some sort of taste testing, that's the first food that they have to try. I've also seen where kids may have to do research projects or write some sort of story or poem about that particular food. Just again, depending on what you want to do. If you do kids' names, there's also ways to group. So if you took a roster of students and needed them in groups of 2 or pairs, it automatically does that for you and then can shuffle them around. Or again, you have a roster and you need 2 teams, here you go. This just kind of shows you what that may look like. Penny, I see your question there in the chat box. Working on an escape room in Google. How could create a Flippity word scramble and insert the link? Yes, you could. So at this point, if you see up here, all you would have to do is that link is what you are going to share with your youth. So we'll talk about how to get there, but yes, so that's what's really cool is that, you know, for example, they could spin the wheel, you know, and then it lands on pecan. So that may be step 1. And then number 2 may be to go to the Georgia Pecan Producers Association webpage and answer these type of questions. So yes, all you have to do is just share that link up there. All right, see, this is why I love this stuff. It's so cool. Again, no frills, but it works and it's pretty cool stuff. So perhaps my favorite thing in Flippity are called manipulatives. And so this background right here, I've inserted a Venn diagram. It could be blank. You could do the 2 overlapping circles. You could do squares or rectangles or things like that. And then you have these little boxes of text. And you can actually customize the different colors. So they can be, I think, white and then maybe 6 or 7 colors as well. And so for this one, what you can do is instruct youth to take the 3 orange words. So herpetology is in the middle because herpetology is the study of amphibians and reptiles, right? So then they have the ability to click and drag and move these words around. And then if you look, the white words are different characteristics. For example, either amphibians lay their eggs in water, reptiles lay their eggs in water, or both amphibians and reptiles lay their eggs in water. So youth would have the opportunity to figure out where these different categories may go. All right. The words that are green are actually types of reptiles or amphibians. So we know frogs are amphibians as well as salamanders, but snakes are indeed reptiles along with alligators and crocodiles. So essentially they have that opportunity to take these words and text box and manipulate or move them around. So a lot of fun that can come of this. With this, I will tell you, Kieran, that's a great question. So there is no way to check this for accuracy because ultimately what they're doing is just moving these around. There may be another program out there that does something like that. I'm just not sure of it. But what I have done before with young people is that after they have built their Venn diagram or maybe some other things I've done before is give them an example. And is it science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, and maybe why? So letting them move these words around, let them take a screenshot at this point. And then they can actually send that image back to you and you would be able to check it for accuracy. This is also really cool if you need to show the relationship between and among different types of words. So maybe again, you're talking about the animal kingdom and it's divided into vertebrates and invertebrates, and our vertebrates are divided into 5 main groups. So it would be, you know, birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and fish, and then they could continue to kind of build down. And that's a great question, Tracy. So they're going to be working on this by themselves. So right now, what I'm moving around, if I were to share the link with you all, that's not what you're going to see. You're going to see that blank board that I shared there at the beginning. So it's not like a shared Google Doc, which I know can kind of be frustrating when multiple people are working on the same thing. So it's only happening on their individual device and not in some sort of cloud-based experience. Which can be good or bad, just depending on what you want to do. But great question, Tracy, absolutely. So, and then last but not least, before I give you time to kind of play around and see some of these resources, is the Flippity scavenger hunt. So you have the ability to create different locks, just depending on how many questions you have. You can click on the lock and then a question can pop up. You can also put an image. So again, what type of tree is this? Or, you know, what insect or what grade of egg or whatever you're doing, right? What provides energy for the water cycle to happen? sun. You have to be really careful when you set these up. If you want a kid to get correct answers, if they capitalize the S or if they capitalize all of the letters or none of the letters, just be very specific. A question can actually take multiple right or wrong responses. So that's what's interesting is, again, just the way the code works. If you want sun and sun all to be correct, you just have to specify that in that spreadsheet. It's not hard to do, but you do have to know that sometimes it can get kind of tricky. The other thing is you can always ask young people, what's your favorite color? So something that may be subjective or may have multiple answers. And regardless of what they put in the box, it could be counted correct if you set the code up that way. So here we go. What provides energy for the water cycle? The sun. That's correct. My little lock is now open, turned to green, and now I'm able to go back to the page and work on lock number 2. If I don't know the answer, maybe I just make up something. You can see that it does not open there, so I can go back. Maybe I want to click on 4 at this point. Most of the water on the earth's in our ocean. So you can see each time you open that lock, it's going to go back on that particular screen. So again, to Tracy's point, you could send this link out and then youth could work on it in their own time. So it's not like they're sharing one scavenger hunt. I did a training for our 4-H professionals here in Georgia last fall on some science activities. And at the end of the training, I created a scavenger hunt like this that asked questions about the resources that I shared with them. So, you know, for example, which lesson plan had the objective that you've had to list different wildlife species in Georgia? And it was lesson plan number 5. So they had to put that in. And after they answered all of the questions, the first 3 people to email me a screenshot that all of their answers or all their locks were unlocked and their answers were correct, I mailed them a just some resources, a fun book and things like that for them to be able to use. So I've used this with adults as a way, as a fun wrap up and getting them to dig into materials. Donna, I see your question there. Can they all play at the same time? And you can see who unlocks the answers first. So that's a good question. As the creator, once you create the link, you're not able to see like a leaderboard that shows, you know, Donna has made it all the way through lock 4 right now, but Casey's still on lock 2. There's no real way to track that. That's why when I did it with a group of adults, I just said, here's the link. Once you're finished, send me a screenshot back into my email to see who was able to complete it first. All right. We'll take a quick pause. What I'm going to do, based on my clock, it looks like it's 1:35 Eastern time. So I'm going to give us about 5 minutes. I'm going to put links to all 4 of these that I just demonstrated in the chat box and give you all the opportunity to kind of play around with them. Or if you just want to go to the general Flippity page, that's fine as well. And then we'll come back together about 1:40, certainly answer any questions that you may have, and then I'll show you how to use that Google Sheets, those templates to build these type of things. And while you're playing around, just so I'll continue to monitor the chat box. If questions come up, that'll be great. And then we'll come back together at 1:40 and I'll begin to show you how to do some of these on your own. All right. So in the interest of time, we'll come back together. And again, just wanted to give you a quick sampling. Kind of, I've done some demonstrating, but let you all play around with the resources. And then based on just, what Flippity has to offer, I'd like to maybe be able to demo a few of these in terms of how to use the template and actually build them. I'll look to the chat box. I'm all about some crowdsourcing. So is there a particular type of activity that you would like for me to demonstrate how to build? A quiz show, the random name picker, the manipulatives, the scavenger hunt, the matching game. Does anybody have, Catherine, you would choose the board game. That's a tough one, but it's a fun one. Yeah, so maybe we'll take a peek at the board game and the quiz show, just to show you what these look like real quick. The board game is pretty cool because these little pieces are all movables. And then you have the ability to create question cards. You can see that pop up right here. You can put links, you can put YouTube videos, things like that. You have a fun little rollable dice. You have the option of making your squares have images. You can also do these little instructions. So, for example, let's say you come here, you answer your question correctly, then you roll your dice, you move 3, and then it says you can also move forward an additional 3. So very complicated. The one thing to know with the board game is even though there are different movable pieces and things like that, if multiple people wanted to play together, they would all have to use essentially the same device, the same computer, or there may be one person hosting the game, and sharing their screen. But again, if I were to send this link to you, your board game's going to look like however you manipulate it, as opposed to it all happening in real time. So that's just important consideration to think about. But of course, if you had, a meeting room and you were able to do face-to-face programs, you could build this and kids would be able to come up, and this could be on a computer and being projected or something like that. Beth, that's a great question. So yes, if somebody has created, something in Flippity already, you can collaborate with them that spreadsheet, because again, this is all made in a spreadsheet, and then they could potentially edit it as well. So super fun to be able to do that, which is great because one person, could tackle poultry content, one person could tackle beef cows, one could do, wildlife, whatever, some different topics may be, and then you could just tweak them on your own. Yep. So real quick, just to show kind of how this board game works. Again, it can be it's a big one. But with any of them, basically you're going to start with this template. So you're going to click template, and it's going to ask you, again, I'm already logged into my Google account, copy document. That's the very first thing you're always going to do, is to make a copy, and it defaults to that, so you don't have to remember it. And it takes a minute or two. But you can see here how this is built. If you look down at the bottom, I always look at my tabs first. So this is the board game itself. Then you have card decks and materials, and then the get the link card. And we'll talk about what all those mean. So with this board game, you'll see it has the start space, and then what does that need to look like? So if you want it to be a certain color, you can see here they have colors. You can also put images as well. And again, in the FAQ, it tells you how to do that, but essentially you would put a URL to some sort of image. If you needed instructions, you can give it these instructions, like move forward or backwards or stop. If you don't want any type of instruction, you just simply come in and delete those, right? So let's say you don't want any of those images. Again, you can just delete those and then add in what color you would like. Very customizable, again, to whatever you want to do. The second tab is those card decks. So you can, that shows you the card and the answer. So maybe your question is, what is H2O? And then the answer would be water. So I will tell you, if you have this content, you know, maybe quizzes or worksheets or things like this already ready to go, it's so much easier than trying to start with nothing. So if you have that content pulled, then you're able to easily just type in what you need, and you don't have to think about what your answers may be. ROPROXIDE. So you can see here how you can make different decks of cards, the materials, again, the little token images, all of this is already defaulted. So unless you want to delete something, let's say you only want 4, you just come in and hit delete, etc., etc. So the biggest thing to know is while you're doing this, this is going to be saved in real time in your Google Cloud. But before you're able to make this live, you have to do this step that sometimes I forget. So I try to remember to say this a lot, file, publish to web. And then you have to publish, and then typically it asks you, do you really want to do that? All those things. So you have to publish this file, because essentially you think about, you've copied somebody else's stuff, now you've made some edits, and you have to publish it on your own. At this point, click down here to get your link, and then it provides a customizable Flippity link that you would click, and then this is what would get shared among your group. So these are the questions. You remember I only did 4 little board game pieces. So here are those. If you click on my cards, you can see here's the random cards that I have. Remember, we deleted some of those images. So this is the game that I actually created from that spreadsheet. So let's call it like it is. Somebody who's really smart was able to take all of this information that's in a spreadsheet, write the computer codes to create a board game, which is pretty awesome stuff. So again, the more familiar you are with using tables, you know, columns and rows, spreadsheets, those type of things, the easier I think some of this comes, but anybody can do this, y'all. Board game, again, is kind of hard to start out with, but just know that's an option that's there. I think somebody also said the quiz show. That's one of my favorites. So just to show you what it looks like, similar to Jeopardy, you have the categories across the top and the point values going down each of those rows. So what's really neat, for example, for bees, how do bees communicate? They do this really cool thing, the waggle dance, right? And so the answer then gets displayed. What's really cool is if you want to have multiple teams, you have the ability to do that. You can add teams or take them away. You can even change their name. You know, kids always come up with fun team names, right? What's really cool is, let's say world capitals, you ask the question, here's the answer, and let's say the purple lions got it right and the barking dogs got it wrong. You can actually click those, and then when you go back to the main page, it actually scores for you in real time, which is pretty neat, so that you can see how this is breaking down. So I can, of course, envision this being something in a face-to-face setting, or even, you know, virtually, you as the creator would share your screen to be able to do this. Unless you want kids to just work through something like this on their own, they could do that as well. So let's go back. We'll talk about how to build a quiz show. So again, first thing you want to do is hit that make the template and then make a copy. So here's your Google Sheet that opens up. And this looks pretty similar to what we just saw, right? So we have 6 categories across the top, and then question and answer. So we can come through, and let's say we're going to have a category about space. Can y'all tell I like science? Rocks inside the earth all the way across. And then we're able to come here and type in our question. And then we're able to type in our response. And you can do this for every category and every point value. There's also like a final Jeopardy question that'll pop up at the end, which is pretty fun. And remember, what you'll want to do is do file, publish to web, publish, okay, close that out, and then come down here to that tab at the bottom, get the link here. That is the link that you're going to share with others, this Flippity link, and you can see my changes were made, space, rocks inside the earth, etc., etc. All right, let's see, can you do the Jeopardy quiz show in a Zoom meeting and not give out the links? Absolutely. So what I would do there is simply me as the hostess of the game show, I would open up this link in my browser and then share screen like I'm doing with you all. And so what could be fun is that at this point, you know, you have the different teams. You could put kids in breakout rooms if you wanted to, or they could just, you know, type their responses to the chat box, something like that. So you wouldn't necessarily share the link with the kids, but you would be the one who would be able to host that. And Gail, I was going to come back to your comment in the chat box as well. Sorry, I missed you there. So Gail, that's something to remember too. So if you think about it, even though when you share the link with kids, if you're going to put them in like breakout rooms and they're going to do, you know, maybe something like the manipulative as a group, one person in that group would still need the link so that they could share their screen and they could talk about it together, if that makes sense. So that's just what you have to think about, is depending on the type of activity, that what's happening is not happening in real time. So even if I share the link with all of you on our webinar today, so 40 people, what you're seeing is on your individual screen, and what I'm seeing is different on my individual screen, even though we're using the same link, because what's moving doesn't happen live. Hey Gail, no worries on things. Yeah, like we're all learning this together. So great question. I appreciate y'all asking. I said earlier, like I just kind of self-appointed, like let's figure out virtual programming. So it's all good. We're all in this together. So I'm not concerned at all. Great question there. All right, I think somebody mentioned bingo, so we'll show bingo and maybe one more if we have the opportunity to do that. Bingo is kind of cool for a variety of reasons. This shows you here the default game that they have are states and capitals. And so what you can do is after you have built your list, you know, again, this can be places in your community. It could be, you know, animal parts, it could be anything, right? Different fruits and vegetables, whatever you choose, right? You can hit print. And so how many bingo boards do you want? And each time those bingo boards are going to be unique. So if you need a set of 20, you can click print, and then those will pop up as PDFs. Taking my computer a minute to get them loaded. But essentially each of those bingo boards are unique. So if you wanted to do something face-to-face, you could print those out. Everybody gets their own bingo board. Everybody's all happy. And then you could physically mark them. So you can see here what those will look like. And they print one per page. So even though this looks like a clunky file, it's not. It's it'll print one per page. The other thing is, which is kind of cool, is that you can actually send players a link, or you can send them the QR code. So if you had a group of kids, you could actually send this out And that here is the board for Casey, right? You could, and then as you're doing the game, they can actually physically click. And then what's interesting, this one's a little different than the others. You can clear the board and then you can click new board. So if you wanted to do a bingo like over Zoom, you could send everybody this link and tell them to click new board 5 times, you know, or whatever. And it just keeps randomizing the word. So as soon as they're feeling good, that can be their bingo board for that round. And again, they have the dots that they can click. And then hopefully we'll get a bingo there, which is kind of fun. With Flippity Bingo, just to show you how to make those, again, go to your template, make a copy. You see here, they did states and capitals. You don't necessarily have to do things that go together. So you could, if you wanted to delete all of those capitals, you could do that. And let's say the terms you want to use are different fruits and vegetables. So you could start with apple, orange, pear, grape, etc. And so then once you create those options, all your different terms, you can also see here, you know, if you want a free space, some of those kind of things. Remember, you have to publish to web, publish, of course, close that out, and then do the whole get the link to be able to open up the bingo cards that you've created. All right. So I know that was like drinking from a fire hose, right? Probably a lot of info I threw at you at once. And part of that is there's just so much on Flippity. I knew that there's no way we could talk about all of this in an hour, but that's okay. So I would like to hear from you. No pressure, but if this is something that could certainly be applicable in your programming, if you have ideas, I would love to see those in the chat box, because that's a cool way we can learn from each other, right? So I see a lot of appreciation coming in, which is super nice. So again, I hope this is something that's helpful for you. One thing, somewhat super selfishly, in the chat box, I'm going to throw a quick URL as those answers are coming in. I see out dairy and horse quiz bowl. Those are great ways that this can be, you know, especially again when we think of content stuff. So the link I put in the chat box literally asks 3 questions: your first and last name, your email address, and your state. And if you don't mind completing that for me, again, no pressure, but what I would like to do is email you tomorrow. It'll be blind carbon copied, so nobody will know. I'll send you not only of course a link to Flippity and then the PowerPoint from today, but I'll also send you a handout that I have made that has some great just tips about like what is a manipulative versus a matching game or something like that. So hopefully that can be helpful for you. And again, do want to let you know as well, you'll have my contact information. If you fill this out, I'll also put it in the chat box. But if you have a group of professionals, you know, whether it's 4-H staff members, whether it is you know, volunteers, whatever. If this is something that could be helpful for you, whether you may coordinate district or regional or state trainings or what have you, do you know that nowadays when we can do so much over Zoom and technology, I would be happy to Zoom into, you know, a district or regional or state meeting or whatever, and provide something like this that could be customizable for your group. We could choose a couple different activities or You know, again, it's hard to cover a lot with Flippity in 1 hour because there's just so much there. But I, again, would be happy to make something like that happen if, of course, it meets, you know, what your need is. So do know that I will volunteer to do that. Just feel free to contact me. And again, tomorrow, if you share your email address with me, I'll share these resources with you just so that you have it and hopefully it can be helpful. I know times are wild and crazy. This is probably not why anyone went into working in 4-H and Extension, is because they wanted to virtually deliver programs. But I do think it's important that we have that opportunity to network and learn from each other. So again, I'm going to hang around. I don't know if, John, there's anything else that needs to be shared, but happy to stay around and answer questions or anything like that. Look at comments that are there in the chat box. But thank you all so much. I know this was a lot to take in, but always happy to help, and hopefully you can use these resources.
Thank you, Casey.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, John.